In this video, we're going to talk about scale, which is frequently a part of maps that we will look at, but has a couple other uses within geography. So we're going to talk about the different ways we use the term scale, what they mean, and then what scale means when we're looking at a map. So the first slide is talking about kind of the different uses of the term scale. So scale is a confusing term because it has a couple different kind of variations of the same meaning. But when we look at a map and we see in the bottom left-hand corner, usually it looks like a line or a graphic. Sometimes we will see what we call a scale, which is a specific measurement that reflects the relationship of the sort of surface of the map or of a feature's surface to the actual size on Earth. So the way that is done usually is, like we said, kind of in a linear way or through a graphic that tells you the distance on the map and how it relates to the distance in real life. So that is what we call a scale. You can also see it sometimes as a ratio or as a fraction. And then there's a few other uses of the term scale, which refer to basically what we're looking at when we look at a map. So the scale of the map being shown, so basically of the entire map, what are we looking at? Is it of the entire world at a global scale? Is it of an individual country at a national scale? Or is it sort of zoomed in and on a metropolitan or a local scale? And then the last term, scale of analysis, we will get to at the end of this video. All right, so like we said for the first one, map scale, we see it usually one of these three ways, either as a graphic or as a verbal kind of sentence, math sentence, or as a representative fraction or ratio. And basically what the information we're getting from the scale is the distance or the sort of measurements of the map themselves. How do they compare to actual real life and the surface of the Earth? So it might say something like 1 centimeter equals 1 kilometer, telling us kind of how we can actually plot distance or how we can actually figure out what the distance on the map represents. So in this one, we can see a map at a global scale of the entire world. And then we see the scale at the bottom left-hand corner. So for each of these measurements, we have about 2,000 miles, right? So you can, if you look at the United States, we can see the United States kind of going more than the first tick mark, but essentially about 3,000 miles across, if we're looking at it. That seems about accurate. So this gives us a way to measure distance and what we see on the map itself. And similarly here, we see a proportion, so 1 to 35 million, if we're comparing it to the actual size of Earth. And then we see that kind of zoomed in. So as we zoom in, the scale itself changes. And you can see another variation of this at the bottom where it says 1 inch equals 43 miles, giving us kind of a reference point for distance. All right, so that is one way in which we use the term scale. Another way, and probably the way that we will use the term scale the most are going to kind of fall into the next two categories. So essentially is the answer to the question, what portion of the world is being shown? What is the geographic focus of this map? Which geographic area is the focus of this map? So some possibilities, like I said, we could be looking at a world map at a global scale. We could be seeing an entire world region, such as East Asia or Northern Africa. We would call this a regional scale. We could see an entire country, so this would be at a national scale. Or if it's just part of a country, like a United States state, we would call that a subnational scale or Canadian province. And then if we're looking at an entire city, the term that we would use to describe that would be a local or metropolitan scale. All right. So just looking at these, we can see 5 different scales. We see a global scale kind of the political map of the world, the one that we see in the top left-hand corner. The top right-hand corner we would categorize as being a regional scale of North America, or continental scale, I guess you could say. I don't hear that much, but that would work. Just this map of the Philippines would be a national scale. Basically, we're showing an entire country, so that would be at a national scale. The one in the middle row at the bottom, British Columbia, that is a province of Canada, right above us. So we would call that a provincial scale if we're talking about Canada, or we would call that a subnational scale. So subnational means that we're looking at something below the national level. So that would fit the bill there. And then we see this map of Dallas would be at a metropolitan scale. So that is the term scale. So when I say what is the scale of this map, the answer is whatever is being shown. So that is the The answer to the question, what portion of the world is being shown, I should say. All right, the last term is a little bit tricky and throws a wrench into some things. But frequently in here, we will be looking at maps that are going to confer data to us. And we are going to be using these maps to analyze things, right? So for this one, we're looking at the percentage of the country's population living in urban areas. And we can see the data is different for different countries across the world. So the term scale of analysis essentially reveals differences in data. So scale of analysis is the term that essentially means where do the differences in data occur on the map? At what level? So the sentence I always share with students, and I think is a good way to answer both scale and scale of analysis, is to say something like the purpose of the map is to analyze blank at the blank level, meaning to analyze what scale, so which part of the world, at what level. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so scale of analysis can be the same types of things as scale, things like global, regional, national, subnational, and local. But essentially, we're looking at where do we see differences in terms of the data. So this map on the left-hand side, the one about percentage of population, we see is at a global scale, right? It is showing the entire world. But we see differences in data occurring at the national level. So we would say that the scale of analysis for this map is national, right? We are analyzing each country and its data at the national level. And that hopefully that makes sense. And then in the right-hand side, we see another global scale. But the scale of analysis here is not national. It seems like they are configuring it by continent or by region, right? So we would say the scale of analysis on the right-hand side would be regional. So you can see when we're using thematic maps, we see differences in data, and we use the term scale of analysis to discuss where those occur. So the last one we see here, the scale would be at a national scale. So the entire United States is shown. And then the differences occur by county. So that we would say the scale of analysis is by county or local, but I would prefer if you said by county. Okay? So hopefully you can kind of clue in on the different main questions to answer is the difference between scale and scale of analysis, and what each of those terms mean. All right, thanks.